You've been taught to fear your darkness, to avoid it, to bury it, to outrun it, to pretend it isn't there. Your entire life, people told you, stay positive. Don't think about the past. Focus on the light. As long as you're a good person, you're fine. But if that were true, if ignoring your pain actually freed you from it, why do the same patterns keep repeating? Why do the same wounds keep resurfacing in different faces, different relationships, different moments, different timelines of your life? Why do the things you thought you moved on from still whisper in the back of your mind when the room gets quiet? Why do you feel a heaviness you can't explain, an ache without a name, a tension in your chest you keep trying to breathe away? Why does the past keep leaking into the present if you're supposedly over it? No one told you the truth. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your friends, not your culture, not even most spiritual teachings. Here's the truth you weren't supposed to know. What you call your darkness is not the enemy, it's the unintegrated self, the fractured part of you trying to come home. You weren't taught that. You were taught the opposite. You were taught to chase the light and demonize the shadow. But the ancients knew better. The Hermetic adepts knew. The light that refuses the shadow becomes blind. Shadow work isn't negativity. It isn't self-hatred. It isn't digging through trauma for no reason. It isn't victim consciousness. Shadow work is integration. It's the process of reclaiming the parts of you you exiled in order to survive. And here's the part that hits hardest. You didn't choose your shadow. It was chosen for you. By your upbringing, your environment, your culture, your early memories, your survival instincts. Some part of you learned, very young, that certain emotions weren't safe, certain truths weren't acceptable, certain versions of you weren't allowed. So you locked them away, deep, silent, unseen. But locked does not mean gone. Buried does not mean dead. Forgotten does not mean healed. Silenced does not mean integrated. And you feel it, don't you? That sense that something in you is watching from behind the curtain. Something unspoken. Something powerful. Something old. Something that doesn't fit neatly into the good person identity you were told to perform. You feel its eyes. You feel its breath. You feel its pull. And you've misunderstood it your whole life. You thought it was the monster in the basement. But it was the you abandoned. Not the weak you, not the damaged you, not the broken you. The raw, unfiltered, unmasked, unapologetic you. The version of you that felt too real for a world that preferred you obedient, palatable, predictable, manageable. That version of you didn't disappear. It became the shadow, and the shadow has one job, only one. To guide you back to the parts of yourself that were never allowed to exist. The truth is uncomfortable. Your shadow is not the darkness you fear. It is the truth you're avoiding. Because here is the paradox. You can meditate for hours. You can recite affirmations. You can visualize a better life. You can read every spiritual book. You can chase high vibration until you're dizzy. But if your shadow is unintegrated, your timelines won't shift. Your manifestations won't land. Your relationships won't stabilize. Your purpose won't clarify. Your inner peace won't last. Because the shadow, unseen, unacknowledged, unintegrated, will keep choosing for you from behind the scenes. It chooses your partners, your triggers, your fears, your insecurities, your reactions, your sabotaging patterns, your emotional loops, your timeline. Not because it's punishing you, but because it's trying to reveal something. I need to be seen. Shadow work is not a punishment. It's not a dark night. It's not a descent into madness. Shadow work is a reunion, a return, a merging, a remembering. But to reach it, you must first confront the lie you've lived inside your whole life. Light equals good, dark equals bad. This binary was handed to you as a way to control your psyche, because a person at war with their own darkness is a person who can be controlled by fear, by guilt, by shame, by pressure, by expectation, by external authority. A person who integrates their shadow becomes uncontrollable, unmanipulable, unafraid, whole. Ancient mystics called this state the return of the double, the merging of the two selves, the conscious self and the hidden self, into one sovereign being. You're not broken, you're fragmented, and fragments can be reclaimed. Everything you're afraid to look at is a door. Everything you've resisted is a guide. Everything you've repressed is the key. Your shadow is not the darkness that destroys you. It's the darkness that completes you. And once you're ready to understand what the shadow really is, where it comes from, why it forms, and how it shapes every timeline you enter, you'll realize you were never fighting the darkness. You were fighting your own unclaimed power. Now we go deeper, into the hidden history behind the shadow itself. Welcome to Part 2, Hidden Knowledge Reveal. In the oldest mystery traditions, long before psychology existed, long before Carl Jung gave the shadow a name, long before trauma became a scientific term, the ancients already understood the darkness within the human being. And they did not fear it. They revered it. To them, the shadow was not a flaw. It was a gate, a doorway into the hidden chambers of the soul that the waking mind has forgotten. A path only the brave walked, illumined not by sunlight, but by the inner fire of remembrance. This truth was never meant for the masses. It was reserved for initiates who had passed the first veil. The veil of comfort, the veil of denial, the veil of false light. Because only those who were ready to face themselves could be entrusted with the deeper teachings. Let me take you there now. The old temples of Kem, the two thrones of the self. In the temples of Kem, what the modern world calls ancient Egypt, there existed a ritual chamber known as the Hall of the Two Thrones. On one throne sat a carved figure of a radiant being, the Ka, the luminous self, the identity you show the world. On the second throne sat a figure cloaked in darkness, the Kaibit, the shadow self, the identity you hide. Initiates were taught that enlightenment was impossible unless both thrones were occupied within the self, not as enemies battling for dominance, but as two halves of the same soul returning to their rightful seats. The priests would whisper, "To banish the shadow is to blind the light." The shadow was never the monster, it was the unclaimed king. Be the eye of Horus, the part you refuse to see. Most people recognize the eye of Horus as a symbol of protection or consciousness, but they don't know its deeper meaning. The right side of the eye, the curved corner descending like a teardrop, represented the unseen self, the hidden, the repressed, the emotions buried beneath the surface. It symbolized the darkness you refuse to acknowledge, not because it's evil, but because it's powerful. The ancients believed the eye wasn't whole until both sides, the seen and the unseen, were integrated. Shadow work is the process of giving the unseen side of the eye its full sight again, because the soul doesn't become awakened by only opening to light. It becomes awakened by learning to see through the dark. The myth of Set and Horus, the war within. You've probably heard the myth. Set, the god of chaos, battles Horus, the god of clarity. But the true Hermetic interpretation is not a story of good versus evil. It is a map of the human psyche. Set is not the demon. Set is the shadow, the wild, instinctual, emotional, unprocessed forces within you, the part of you that was hurt and then taught to stay silent. Horus is the conscious self, structured, aware, rational, composed. Together, they are not enemies, they are brothers. And the ancient teaching was this: Horus cannot ascend the throne until he makes peace with Set, meaning your highest self cannot awaken until your shadow is integrated. The war between them is the war you feel inside yourself, the war between who you pretend to be and who you really are. Shadow work is not defeating Set. Shadow work is uniting with him. When Set becomes an ally, you reclaim the ferocity, passion, intuition, and strength you exiled long ago. The underworld journey, the descent into the self. Nearly every ancient culture preserved a myth about descending into the underworld to retrieve something lost. Inanna descends into the great below. Orpheus enters the realm of shadows for Eurydice. Osiris travels through Duat after being dismembered. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the journey through the Bardo. These weren't stories about death, they were maps for shadow work. The underworld represented the unconscious, the realm where all the forgotten versions of you live. The part of you that wasn't allowed to cry, the part of you that had to be strong too early, the part of you that wasn't allowed to express anger, the part of you that was shamed, silenced, judged, mocked, rejected. These parts did not die, they went underground. And the descent symbolized the return of the soul to recover its scattered pieces. Shadow work is the modern word for the ancient descent. And just like the myths reveal, no one returns from the underworld unchanged. You return fuller, stronger, truer, no longer fragmented. The Emerald Tablets, the dark mirror. Hidden deep within the Emerald Tablets of Thoth is a line that the modern world misreads. In the darkness grows the power. The darkness they spoke of was not evil, it was potential. It was the unseen reservoir of power you cannot access until you face your own inner abyss. This was the Hermetic secret. Your shadow is the vault where your untapped power sleeps. Your confidence, your intuition, your boundaries, your clarity, your creativity, your fire, your voice, your sovereignty. These are not developed in the light. They are awakened in the dark. The shadow does not contain your weaknesses. The shadow contains the parts of you that were too powerful for the world to handle. This is why the Emerald teachings required initiates to face the dark mirror, a ritual where they confronted every truth they refused to see. The mirror was not a test, it was a key. Of the forbidden teaching, the shadow is the guide. There was one teaching so dangerous to authority that it was suppressed, buried, distorted for centuries. The shadow is the inner teacher. Because a person who listens to their shadow becomes sovereign, no longer controlled by guilt or fear or shame or societal pressure. A person who integrates their shadow cannot be manipulated by external systems. They become whole, untouchable, aligned. This is why the myth says that when Horus finally unites with Set, he becomes a king not by inheritance, but by initiation. The ancients understood the inner throne is earned through integration. The final revelation. The shadow is your other self. The biggest lie ever taught was that your shadow is a monster. But the truth is this: your shadow is the version of you that felt too much, cared too deeply, saw too clearly, hurt too intensely, and loved too honestly for the world you grew up in. It protected you. It carried what you could not. It held what you weren't allowed to express. It is not your enemy. It is your unlived life, the part of you waiting to be reclaimed. Shadow work is the process of bringing this other self back into the light of your awareness, not to destroy it, but to finally become whole. You do not become enlightened by bypassing your darkness. You become enlightened by integrating it. Now that you've stepped into the ancient foundation of what the shadow truly is, its mythic origin, its hermetic meaning, its sacred role, you're ready to understand how the shadow actually works inside your mind, your body, and your life. Welcome to Part 3, Cosmic Mechanism Explained. Shadow work may look emotional, psychological, even symbolic on the surface. But beneath all those layers, there is a mechanism, a real, structured, energetic architecture that governs how the shadow forms, how it hides, how it controls your life from behind the curtain, and how integrating it shifts your vibration, your consciousness, your behavior, and the timeline you inhabit. This is not just psychological theory. It is quantum consciousness, hermetic law, energetic truth, and nervous system reality interwoven into a single system. Let's decode it. 1. The shadow is a frequency dead zone in your field. Your consciousness is a vibration. It radiates through your entire energy field, your thoughts, your emotions, your body, your perception, your identity. But every time you suppress a part of yourself, you create a vibrational pocket where your awareness refuses to flow. This pocket becomes a shadow cluster, a frozen, unprocessed frequency in your emotional field. These pockets block your manifestation power, distort your intuition, create repeating emotional loops, attract familiar pain, sabotage relationships, limit your capacity to receive, anchor you into low timelines. Why? Because a shadow is not darkness. It is unfelt energy. And unfelt energy cannot move. Energy that cannot move creates energetic gravity, and energetic gravity pulls you into the same patterns, the same experiences, the same timelines. This is why your shadow feels heavy, because it literally is. 2. The shadow forms the moment you reject an emotional frequency. Every emotion has a vibration. Joy, grief, anger, desire, fear, power, tenderness. Each one is an energetic tone inside the human field. When you were young, you learned which frequencies were acceptable and which were dangerous. So you split. You compartmentalized. You threw certain frequencies into the dark because your environment could not hold them. This is the mechanism. Emotion arises. Survival instinct judges it. Unacceptable. Exile. Shadow. The emotion didn't disappear. It simply moved into the unconscious and kept vibrating there. Shadow, evil energy you stopped identifying with, but that still operates beneath your awareness. It becomes a ghost frequency, not dead, not gone, just hidden. And because it is hidden, it hijacks your life in ways you don't see. 3. The shadow becomes a sub-personality running an old program. Once an emotion is exiled, it doesn't stay as just an emotion. It becomes a self, a psychological fragment, a sub-identity, a part of you stuck in the moment it was suppressed. This part of you still feels the old emotion, still believes the old story, still reacts with the old pattern. Still tries to protect you using outdated strategies, still carries the age, fear, and confusion of when it was created. This is why your reactions sometimes feel younger than your age. Your shadow parts are younger. They froze in time. Shadow work is not thinking about your past. It is remembering the versions of you that are still alive in your unconscious, waiting to be integrated. 4. The shadow controls your timeline through your reactivity. Now we enter the quantum mechanics. Timelines shift when your state of consciousness shifts. but nothing shifts your consciousness faster or more violently than a trigger. Triggers are shadow activations. A trigger is not the world hurting you. A trigger is the world touching a part of you you still haven't integrated. When a shadow gets activated, your emotional frequency drops. Your nervous system enters survival mode. Your identity collapses to an old version of you. Your perception contracts. Your choices narrow. Your vibration becomes inconsistent. This instantly locks you into a lower probability timeline. This is why negative cycles repeat. You are not manifesting badly. You are reacting from shadow. Shadow reactivity is the mechanism that pulls you into the same life over and over again. Integration breaks this loop. 5. The shadow distorts the observer effect. The quantum field responds not to what you consciously say you want, but to the total vibration you hold. If your conscious mind says, "I want love," but your shadow holds, "I am unworthy," your shadow wins. If your conscious mind says, "I want abundance," but your shadow believes receiving is unsafe, your shadow wins. If your conscious mind says, "I want peace," but your shadow is vibrating with, "I'm not safe," the field collapses into the shadow-based version of reality. The observer effect is always influenced more by the unconscious vibration than the conscious desire. Shadow work upgrades the observer. When the observer upgrades, the reality it collapses also upgrades. 6. The shadow creates emotional magnetism. Your shadow is a magnet, not by intention, but through resonance. Whatever emotion you suppress is the emotion you magnetize. Suppress anger. Attract situations that provoke anger. Suppress vulnerability. Attract situations that demand vulnerability. Suppress fear. Attract mirrors of your fear. Suppress worthlessness. Attract people who activate it. Not because the universe is cruel, because energy seeks expression. And until it is integrated, it will keep recycling experiences that force you to confront it. This recycling mechanism is not punishment, it is self-return. The universe is not teaching a lesson. Your own unconscious is trying to come home. 7. The shadow blocks your highest timeline by limiting your self-perception. Every timeline is accessed through identity. You cannot inhabit a reality that contradicts who you believe yourself to be. Shadow shapes identity by defining what you believe is possible, safe, allowed, realistic, deserved, available for someone like you. You're not limited by the universe. You're limited by the version of you your shadow forces you to act from. Shadow work dissolves these identity limits by returning your exiled parts to you. When your identity expands, your available timelines expand. Integration equals expansion. Expansion is timeline shift. 8. The shadow holds your power, literally. Here's the Hermetic secret. Every trait you suppress is a power you lose access to. Suppress anger, lose boundaries. Suppress desire, lose purpose. Suppress grief, lose emotional depth. Suppress intuition, lose inner guidance. Suppress confidence, lose manifestation. Suppress rage, lose fire and direction. Suppress sensitivity, lose empathy and artistry. Suppress darkness, lose sovereignty. The shadow is not dark energy. It is power without ownership. When you reclaim the shadow, you reclaim your voice, your instincts, your boundary setting, your discernment, your self-worth, your inner fire, your clarity, your purpose, your intuition. These are not small things. These are the exact frequencies that collapse higher timelines. 9. Integration equals returning the shadow to the light of awareness. Shadow work is not about reliving trauma, blaming the past, overanalyzing, punishing yourself, making darkness wrong. Integration is simple, bringing consciousness to the place where awareness was once absent. Integration mechanism. Awareness enters the shadow. Emotion moves again. Frozen energy thaws. Identity updates. Nervous system re-regulates. Vibration rises. Timelines open. This is not metaphor. This is energetic physics and psychological coherence working together. Shadow work makes your field congruent, coherent, aligned. When your field is aligned, timeline shifts become effortless. 10. When the shadow is seen, it transforms into your ally. A shadow is not dark. A shadow is unobserved. The moment you see it, really see it, its nature changes. What was once fear becomes strength, grief becomes compassion, rage becomes power, shame becomes authenticity, sadness becomes softness, emptiness becomes creativity, confusion becomes intuition, avoidance becomes sovereignty. Integration is alchemy. Shadow, gold, fragment, wholeness, repression, power, fear, freedom. This is why ancient traditions treated the shadow not as a demon, but as a teacher. The shadow is the guide that leads you back to yourself. The cosmic truth. Shadow work is not emotional housekeeping, it is timeline architecture. It is the restoration of energetic flow that allows you to access the highest version of yourself in the quantum field. The shadow is the gate into your next timeline. And now that you understand the hidden mechanics behind it, psychological, energetic, and quantum, you're ready for the most important chapter, the deprogramming turn, where we dismantle the illusions that kept your shadow alive in the first place. Welcome to Part 4, a programming turn. You cannot integrate your shadow while clinging to the beliefs that created it. This is the moment things get uncomfortable. Not because the truth is harsh, but because the lies have been with you for so long they started to feel like home. Shadow work is not emotional housekeeping. It is psychological rebellion. It is the inner revolution where you stop believing the stories that kept your power locked in a basement. Let's dismantle the illusions that built your shadow in the first place. Program number 1, my shadow makes me broken. This is the first lie, the oldest one, the one you absorbed before you even had language. You were taught, if you feel too much, you're dramatic. If you're angry, you're bad. If you're afraid, you're weak. If you want attention, you're selfish. If you cry, you're unstable. If you're vulnerable, you're naive. Every one of these messages was not actually about you. They were about the emotional capacity of the people around you. You weren't broken. Your environment was unprepared. But you internalized the message anyway. You learned to mask, minimize, apologize, shrink, stay quiet. And here's the truth no one gave you. Your shadow didn't form because you were flawed. It formed because your truth was too heavy for someone else to carry. You didn't break. You split. You adapted. And adaptation is not weakness. It's intelligence. Program number 2, the shadow is dangerous. This is the fear that keeps people trapped for decades. Not because the shadow is dangerous, but because it feels unpredictable. You sense there's something alive inside you that you've kept chained for years. Something that wants expression, movement, release. But hear this clearly. Your shadow is not the danger. Your disconnection from it is. The parts of you suppress gain power in the dark through distortion, isolation, and misunderstanding. What feels dangerous is actually your unclaimed power knocking at the door. Your anger holds your boundaries. Your fear holds your intuition. Your grief holds your depth. Your desire holds your purpose. Your shame holds your authenticity. Your rage holds your fire. The danger is not letting these parts integrate, because unintegrated power always leaks sideways. Program number 3, if I ignore it, it goes away. Nothing you suppress ever disappears. It just moves deeper. You can bury it, distract from it, spiritual bypass it, pretend you've moved on. Keep yourself busy, meditate it away, affirmation it away, numb it with productivity, perfectionism, or self-improvement. But shadow doesn't dissolve through avoidance, it evolves. The more you ignore it, the more it shapes your life from the underground. A suppressed shadow controls you by hijacking your reactions. A seen shadow empowers you by returning your clarity. You cannot outrun the parts of you that walk in the dark. They move with you, they breathe with you. They speak through you in every trigger, every sabotage, every repeated cycle. It does not go away, it waits. Program number 4, my triggers are problems. This might be the most paralyzing belief of all, the idea that being triggered is something to fix. But triggers are not the problem. Triggers are messages. A trigger is your shadow saying, this part of me is still alive, still hurting, still waiting to be seen. You think you're being too emotional, but you're actually receiving high-precision data from a part of your consciousness that wants integration. Triggers are not chaos, they are coordinates. Every trigger points to the exact part of you that fractured, the exact memory that froze, the exact emotion that was suppressed, the exact belief that formed, the exact identity that needs updating. A trigger is a map. Shadow work is learning to read it. Program number 5, people will reject the real me. This is the shadow's most common wound, fear of being seen. Not because being seen is dangerous, but because the first time you were truly seen, you were met with judgment. And a young nervous system doesn't understand nuance, it only understands impact. So it created the belief, authenticity equals danger, being myself equals punishment, revealing my truth equals rejection. And you carried those beliefs into adulthood as if they were facts. But here's the revolution, rejection didn't hurt you, abandoning yourself did. Your shadow isn't afraid of people. It's afraid of being abandoned again by you. When you choose yourself fully, deeply, unapologetically, you stop attracting relationships that require your self-betrayal. Program number 6, shadow work is painful. No, shadow work is not painful. Avoidance is. Pain arises from resistance. the tension between truth and denial. When the truth is allowed to move, the pain dissolves. Shadow work often feels like relief, clarity, release, softness, exhale, recognition. Oh, this was never my fault. It feels like coming home, not suffering. The suffering came from living a life designed to keep your truth underground. Shadow work is not descending into darkness. It is removing the chains on your light. Program number 7, I can fix my shadow by thinking differently. This is where most people get stuck. You cannot positive think your way through emotional wounds. The shadow does not speak logic. It speaks sensation, memory, energy, instinct. You cannot mentally override the part of you that formed before your mind was fully developed. The shadow is healed through awareness, presence, permission, expression, integration, not through cognitive analysis. The mind cannot integrate the shadow, only consciousness can. Program number 8, light is the goal. This is the most spiritually dangerous lie of all. The idea that you must stay in the light keeps people spiritually fragmented and psychologically divided. You cannot ascend while rejecting half of yourself. Light without shadow becomes dissociation. Shadow without light becomes overwhelm. Integration is the union, the middle path, the Hermetic marriage. You do not ascend by becoming light, you ascend by becoming whole. Program number 9, the shadow is the last thing I want to face. Of course you feel that way. Everyone does. Not because the shadow is terrifying, but because the shadow is intimate. Facing your shadow means feeling what you've avoided, claiming what you suppressed, admitting truths you buried, revealing the parts of you that were never allowed. But here's the paradox. The moment you turn toward your shadow, something shifts. It stops being the monster in the basement and becomes the child in the dark waiting for you to open the door. The fear dissolves the moment you face it. This is the turning point. This is where the deprogramming becomes liberation. You are not broken. You are not damaged. You are not weak. You are not too much. You are not too emotional. You are not too intense. You are not unlovable. You are a complete being living with incomplete awareness. The shadow is not your failure. It is your fragmented wholeness waiting to return. This is the moment you stop running from yourself and begin walking toward yourself. This is the moment you stop fearing your truth and start reclaiming it. This is the moment you stop performing and start returning. This is the moment the cage opens because you finally stopped hiding the key. Now that the lies have been dismantled, now that the programs have been exposed, you're ready to meet the shadow not as an enemy but as the teacher that will lead you into your next timeline. Take a breath, slow, deliberate, deep enough that your ribs soften and your spine remembers it is allowed to expand again. You can feel it, can't you? That subtle pull inside your chest, the place where light and darkness touch, not as enemies but as two halves of a greater truth finally reaching for each other. This is not a moment of learning. This is a moment of remembering. You are not stepping into something new. You are stepping back into yourself. Everything you've avoided, everything you've buried, everything you've labeled dark, everything you've tried to outrun, it has been waiting for this breath, this stillness, this turn inward. Your shadow has never been a punishment. It has been a door. And now, for the first time in your life, you're standing at its threshold without fear. Let yourself feel that, the shift, the opening, the quiet courage rising like a tide. You are not collapsing. You are returning. The first activation, I turn toward myself. Say it in your mind. Let it echo. Let it settle into the places that have forgotten the sound of your own voice. I turn toward myself. Because every step you've ever taken away from your shadow was a step away from your wholeness. And every step toward it is a step toward your power. Turning toward yourself is the moment the inner war ends. When you turn inward, your shadow stops chasing you, stops pulling at you, stops screaming for attention through patterns, triggers, and pain. The moment you turn toward yourself is the moment you stop surviving and start integrating. This is the doorway. This is the return. This is the beginning. The second activation, what I feel is safe. This is where timelines shift. This is where the trauma loops crack. This is where your nervous system loosens its grip on old identities. Whisper it to yourself, what I feel is safe. Not because every feeling is easy, but because every feeling is allowed. Your emotions were never the enemy. The danger came from believing you weren't allowed to feel them. You are allowed now. You are safe now. You are home now. When your emotions become safe, your shadow becomes visible. When your shadow becomes visible, integration becomes possible. And integration is liberation. The third activation, I claim the parts I abandoned. There are pieces of you still sitting in the dark. The part that cried alone. The part that loved too deeply. The part that was too honest. The part that felt too much. The part that wasn't defended. The part that wasn't heard. The part that wasn't chosen. You abandoned these parts not because they were wrong, but because no one ever showed you how to hold them. You are learning now. Whisper with intention, I claim the parts I abandoned. This is not metaphor, this is frequency. When you reclaim these parts, they return with gifts. Your intuition, your boundaries, your strength, your truth, your rage as signal, your grief as compassion, your sensitivity as sight, your desire as direction. Everything you thought was wrong with you was just unlived power, and it is coming back. The fourth activation, my shadow is my guide. This is the Hermetic secret, the forbidden truth. The teaching whispered only to initiates in the inner chambers of ancient temples. Your shadow is the part of you that remembers what your mind forgot. It carries the memory of who you were before the world told you who you needed to be. It carries the instinct you abandoned to survive, the voice you softened to fit in, the boundaries you never learned to set, the truth you buried to stay loved. Your shadow is not trying to hurt you, it is trying to wake you up. Say it calmly with reverence. My shadow is my guide. The moment you honor it, it stops distorting your life and starts illuminating it. It becomes the compass that points toward the timeline where you are whole. The fifth activation, I am whole. This is the moment of reintegration, the collapse of the inner divide, the return of the unclaimed self. Not perfect, not healed in every direction, not free of emotion or memory. Whole. Wholeness does not mean you no longer feel darkness. Wholeness means you no longer fear it. Wholeness does not mean you no longer have wounds. Wholeness means your wounds no longer control you. Wholeness does not mean you shine without shadow. Wholeness means your light and shadow finally stand together. Say it like you're remembering a forgotten name. I am whole. Let it vibrate in your chest. Let it echo in your ribs. Let it settle in your bones. This is your truth. This is your essence. This is your return. The final activation, I am the light and the darkness. This is sovereignty, not spiritual bypassing, not toxic positivity, not dissociation dressed as enlightenment. Real sovereignty, the kind the ancients recognized, the kind hidden in the Hermetic mysteries, the kind encoded in every myth of descent and return. You are not just the light, you are the darkness that makes the light meaningful. You are not just consciousness, you are the shadow that gives consciousness depth. You are not just the calm, you are the fire beneath it. You are not just the clarity, you are the instinct that sharpened it. You are not just the truth, you are the silence that held it. You are both, and the moment you claim both, your inner split dissolves, your vibration expands, your identity rises, your timeline shifts. This is the frequency of someone who cannot be controlled by guilt, shame, fear, or programming. This is the frequency of someone who walks through the world intact. This is the frequency of someone who has returned to themselves. Breathe, flow deep, present. You are stepping out of fragmentation and into sovereignty. You are stepping out of survival and into wholeness. You are stepping out of the old timeline and into the one where you face yourself without fear and rise. This is your activation, your remembrance, your return. You are the light, you are the darkness, you are the whole, and your new timeline begins now.